A few hours later, like, I had to carry the bodies off the plane and guard them.
Man.
Where they were gonna attack Americans.
Oh, really?
And then, like, when the guys started shooting at the house, they set all their intel on fire, right?
John Shrek McPhee, a U.S. Army Special Operations Sergeant Major, was one of the heroes involved in one of the most shocking and decisive missions of the invasion of Iraq. The hunt for and death of Uday and Qusay Hussein, Saddam's infamous sons. In an operation that could be part of any Hollywood action movie, American forces, led by the feared elite operators of the Delta Force, faced the desperate resistance of these two men who had terrorized the Iraqi people for decades. This is the sensational and heartbreaking story of how these two men, protected by power and wealth for years, finally met their end in a dusty corner of the Iraqi desert. In this new military force video, we will relive every moment of this bloody conflict, which represents the fall of a dynasty and the turning of the tide of the war in the Middle East. Let's begin. On July 22, 2003, in the desert and dusty city of Mosul, in northern Iraq, a military operation that cost bullets, sweat, and blood ended the lives of two of the most feared and hated men in Saddam Hussein's regime, Uday and Qusay, the sons of the deposed dictator. That hot afternoon, American troops carried out a fierce pursuit that culminated in a prolonged and brutal shootout, closing a chapter in the search for justice and revenge in post-Saddam Iraq. Both brothers, heirs to the regime that had kept Iraq under an iron fist for more than 2 decades, were sinister figures in the world's collective imagination. Their lives were quite unusual. They combined an ostentatious and luxurious economic position with a role in the military and security forces of their country. They carried out their tasks with severity and cruelty. They became the second and third most wanted targets for coalition forces, second only to their father. The operation, which involved both conventional forces and elite Delta Force operators, included legendary figures such as Sergeant Major John Shrek McPhee and former Ranger Mike Burke. Both played key roles in the savage confrontation that sealed the fate of the dictator's heirs. Throughout their careers, each had accumulated vast experience in high-risk missions in the most dangerous places in the world. Burke, who had already experienced the invasion of Iraq and the harsh realities of combat, and McPhee, a living legend within the Special Forces, were key players in the Mosul mission.
There was just constantly intel coming down. We were paying people for intelligence. We were just getting all kinds of different information. And, we were just going out and, just trying to action them and find them and everything else. And, there was plenty of times where, the intelligence was good, but a lot of time we just felt like we were chasing ghosts. There was times where, we would run into, resistance and stuff like that. It just kind of honestly depended. And it was very sporadic.
To understand the impact of the operation, it is essential to delve into the lives of the Hussein brothers. They were more than just heirs. They were the pillars on which the Iraqi dictator planned to maintain his regime for future generations. Uday, the eldest, known for his brutality and erratic behavior, was the very image of the decadence of Saddam's regime. Born in 1964, Uday was famous for his eccentricities, his fondness for luxury cars, and his macabre parties, but also for his sadism and unbridled cruelty, thus earning him the nickname, the Devil of Baghdad. As head of the Iraqi Football Federation and president of the Iraqi Olympic Committee, Uday used these positions as a cover for his acts of torture. Athletes who failed to perform up to his expectations were sent to his personal torture facilities, where they suffered brutal punishments. Uday lived a life without restraint, being feared by all, but also hated even within his own circle. Qusay, on the other hand, was more discreet, but no less dangerous. Born in 1966, he was Saddam's favorite son, and his role in the regime was key. As commander of the Special Republican Guard and Internal Security Forces, he oversaw intelligence services and political repression operations. At the time of the U.S. invasion in 2003, he was seen as the likely successor to his father. He would be the man to continue Saddam's legacy in a more calculating but equally ruthless style. The invasion of Iraq by U.S. forces in March 2003 was swift and devastating for Saddam Hussein's regime. Despite initial resistance, Baghdad fell in April of that year, and the image of Saddam's statue being toppled by U.S. tanks became an icon of the end of his regime. However, as control of the country passed from the dictator's hands to those of the coalition, the hunt for regime members intensified. Both sons represented not only the future of Saddam's regime, but also the core of its machinery of repression. It was inevitable that after the dictator's fall, the US-led coalition forces would put them on the most wanted list. They were not only military targets, but symbols of tyranny that had to be wiped off the map of Iraq.
What's this manhunt like when it comes to Saddam's two kids?
So at the time, there was very limited helicopters. There was very limited Humvees. There wasn't a lot of mobility options. And obviously back then, we didn't have the understanding, and the maps and everything else, so like walking out of, Bayap really wasn't an option. So it was just chaos.
With their palaces ransacked and their vast empire collapsing, Uday and Qusay went on the run. They embarked on a desperate flight, moving from one city to another, seeking to escape Uncle Sam's forces.
We're in a vehicle convoy, basically, that were coming through there to try to cross the border. And they got stopped because of all of the aircraft and everything else that was flying around trying to get ahead of them. And they stopped somewhere in between there and got on different vehicles and buggied out. But like literally we were right in front of them and we were going to ambush them when they come across the border control checkpoint.
The Hussein brothers were not completely helpless. There were still regime loyalists willing to help them. Men who would rather risk their lives than betray the family that had ruled them for decades. Their final destination was Mosul, where they sought refuge in the home of Sheikh Nawaf al-Zaidan Muhammad, a distant cousin and tribal chief with enough power and influence to offer them protection in a place where they felt safe. Despite the support networks they had in the north of the country, the shadow of betrayal loomed over them, and it was only a matter of time before the coalition arrived in Mosul to confront them.
If we're gonna fire one time today, we need to be ready to kill this whole fucking village, everybody in it, everybody here, so we walk away. The reality is we can probably make sure that doesn't happen tonight by not firing that shot and fucking trying to sort out these problems one by one.
The operation to capture or kill Uday and Qusay began with a simple walk. Sheikh Nawaf showed up at a U.S. military base and revealed the exact location where Saddam's sons were hiding. The $30 million reward for information about the Hussein brothers was too tempting to pass up. He didn't care that they were part of his family. The cash outweighed the blood tie. Burke and McPhee were notified. Although both operators had already executed numerous missions of extreme risk during the invasion, they knew that this operation would have considerable symbolic and strategic weight. Capturing or eliminating Saddam's sons would not only deal a severe blow to the core of the Ba'athist regime, but would send a clear message to the rest of the insurgent forces. Without wasting time, a team of more than 200 soldiers from the 101st Airborne Division moved towards Mosul to surround the house where the brothers were holed up.
We were told to get on a Black Hawk. We flew on a Black Hawk. We landed in the middle of the desert. A freaking little Cessna with a bunch of weirdos and weird equipment landed, picked us up, flew us somewhere. Then another helicopter. Like, it was this whole weird thing. And then eventually, not in Iraq, another country, we landed, and, you know, we're given some instructions and everything else about what to do to basically, you know, reduce the threat there, and then basically set up ambush lines.
The operation began. Burke and McPhee were part of a special operations team deployed to Mosul to provide support in case the mission needed direct intervention. As always, they were on the front line.
Hey, let's move up there. Right there, that bird, move. We can't shoot anything because there's fucking breezes on the objective.
The American forces knew it would not be a simple operation. The house was fortified, and Uday and Qusay were not willing to give up without a fight. When the troops arrived at the house where the brothers were hiding, the fighting began almost immediately.
This is the commander of the American 101st Airborne Division, part of the International Coalition Forces. You are surrounded. Come out slowly with your arms in the air, and you will not be harmed. This will be your only warning.
So, we die.
Go!
They did not use words, but together with a small group of bodyguards, responded with a hail of bullets from inside the house that turned their hideout into a full-blown battle. 3 American soldiers were wounded in the first exchanges of fire, forcing the troops to momentarily withdraw and request air support. It was then that 2 OH-58 Kiowa helicopters from the Mississippi National Guard were called to the scene. From the air, they rained down fire on the house using 5th caliber machine guns and 2.75-inch rockets to wear down the Hussein brothers' defenses. The airstrikes, however, failed to stop the exchange of fire. Resistance from within continued, forcing the American troops to resort to more extreme measures. The decision was made. Tau missiles would be the final solution.
Get down! Get down! Get down! Get down!
From his vantage point, Sergeant McPhee oversaw the attack while Ranger Mike Burke coordinated the actions of the ground troops. The roar of the explosions shook the house, destroying much of the structure and ultimately ending the brothers' resistance. The siege lasted nearly 6 hours.
We walk up on the house, and there's like literally, I'm coming from one side, my team, and another guy's coming from the other side. And there's a guy sitting there with his AK, just like sitting next to him as security. And like, really, we just walked up, snatched it from him, fucking went in the house. Another guy, we shotgun breached the house, 1 shotgun round. Boom, door comes open. And like, we were like, we just kind of took this dude's family hostage till he turned himself in. And it took like 36 hours.
Wow. When American troops finally entered the rubble of the house, what they found was a chaotic scene. Among the mangled bodies were the remains of Uday and Qusay. The corpses, though badly injured by the explosions and fire, were recognizable enough for the soldiers to identify them. However, to ensure there was no room for error, the bodies were taken away for DNA testing, which would conclusively confirm that the 2 dead men were Saddam Hussein's sons.
Really, they didn't have that much in that house. There was some like, they did try to like make on maps like where they were gonna attack Americans.
Oh, really?
And then like when the guys started shooting at the house, they set all their intel on fire, right? And they dropped it in a washing machine and they closed the lid. And it did. And none of it burned.
Fee and Burke, though hardened by years of combat, could not help but sense the magnitude of the moment. The fall of these two men was not just a military victory, but a final blow to Saddam's regime. In addition to the bodies of Uday and Qusay, 2 other bodies were found. One belonged to Mustafa, Qusay's 14-year-old son, who had been with his father during the escape, and the other was that of a bodyguard. Young Mustafa had also fought to the end, defending the house alongside his father and uncle. The news of the death of Saddam's sons was a devastating blow to the rest of the Ba'athist regime, and a clear message to all those who still harbored hopes of a resurrection of the old power in Iraq. The international press quickly picked up on the operation, and the American administration seized the moment to declare a significant breakthrough in the war against Saddam Hussein's regime. McPhee and Burke, after years of combat in the darkest places in the world, knew they had witnessed a historic moment. The official announcement of the deaths of Uday and Qusay was made by Lieutenant General Ricardo Sanchez. "We are confident that Uday and Qusay were killed today," he said, underscoring the success of the operation.
Hey, I just carried the bodies off the plane later.
Oh, no shit.
But like, yeah, only because like we had all just got back. And like the other troop had like morning duty, and they like got the call, like, and it was like, "You guys got morning duty, like you want to fly with us?" I'm like, "I need some sleep, man." No, you know what I mean? And like I had to do my daytime job, which is fucking running around alone, you know.
Sure.
And then a fucking few hours later, like I had to carry the bodies off the plane and guard them.
The deaths of Uday and Qusay did not bring the peace that many had hoped for. Uday and Qusay did not bring the peace that many had hoped for. While it was a significant blow to the remainder of Saddam's regime, the insurgency in Iraq continued to grow in the years that followed, turning the country into a battleground between different factions. The power vacuum left by Saddam's overthrow, coupled with the fragmentation of forces loyal to the former regime, resulted in a decade of civil conflict and sectarian violence. The deaths of Uday and Qusay Hussein in Mosul were more than just a successful military operation. They were symbolic of the ultimate downfall of Saddam Hussein's dynasty. These two men, who had for so long acted with impunity and brutality, were finally brought down in a confrontation that reflected the rawness of the conflict in Iraq. The images of their corpses, widely disseminated by the media, served as a powerful signal that the Ba'athist regime was dismantled. However, the scars left by both Uday and Qusay on the Iraqi people would last far beyond their lives, with a legacy of fear and suffering that is still felt on the streets of Iraq today. And so the time has come to say goodbye. Thank you very much for staying with us until the end of the video. We recommend that you subscribe to our channel to receive the latest news on international terrorism. We look forward to seeing you again in our next installment of Military Force. See you next time.